The first generation of Pokemon games are extremely broken, and speedrunners have used this to beat the games in creative ways. The reverse badge acquisition category is one of those, effectively beating the game in reverse. And while it sounds pretty cut and dry, there's some luck and a ton of precise play required to complete the category at a top level. So with today's video, I want to talk a little bit about the category's origins, why this even works in the first place, and finally how a Ditto and a level 127 Charizard are used in the current world record for Pokemon Blue version. The first instances of routing RBA date all the way back to 2014. A runner by the name of Golderzoa333 and someone else in the community got the idea from a tool-assisted speedrun they recently watched. What they came up with wasn't too far off the existing any % no save corruption category. Save corruption, or SRAM glitching, is when you go to save the game, and in the process of saving, you very precisely reset the console before all the data is overwritten. If done correctly, this can cause a ton of game-breaking effects when you load back into the save. Due to how hard this is to perform and how broken it is, save corruption is banned from every category except for true any %. With that all being said, there's a bunch of cool glitches in NSC that Golderzoa wanted to use for RBA, and he would do just that in a Pokemon Red low optimized tool assisted speedrun he made in early 2014. In the game's normal route, players would need to beat the 8 gyms mostly in order, then defeat the Elite Four and the champion to beat the game. This requires a ton of planning, use of stat modifying items, and luck with the later battles to make this work in a single sitting. Thankfully, this category glitches in a powerful Pokemon you couldn't get in a normal run, and even skips straight to the Hall of Fame cutscene sequence. Golderzoa's task finished out at about 1 hour and 9 minutes from starting a new file to the beginning of the game's credits. From here, he would perform the first real-time runs of RBA starting in September of 2014. The rest of the Pokemon speedrunning community would follow, with runners such as Shenanigans, Etiquette, New Amber, Chivu, Sierra, Crazy Dan, and Problem Stroll all pushing down the record time for the next 4 years. However, one run stands above the rest of these, achieved by a runner named Stocchi on August 5th of 2020. When it was performed, this record had some of the most complicated and difficult tricks in Gen 1, so we're going to break each of these down to show how broken this run truly is. Now, many of the exploits I'm about to go over require an intricate understanding of the game's code and how it works. Following complicated concepts like these isn't easy, but a free and easy way to help learn how to do that is a click away with today's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with a ton of interactive courses in things like math, data analysis, and programming. Now, I know it's hard to figure out where to start, but Brilliant customizes content to fit your needs, and their guided lessons help you progress at your own pace. For the last month, I've been working through Brilliant's computer science courses and learning the fundamentals of Python in my spare time. In the Programming with Python course, I've had to solve various coding puzzles that have really helped me in my journey of learning the language. Brilliant's interactive courses are small and easy to pick up, so even if you have a busy lifestyle like myself, all you need is a few minutes to solve a problem or two and learn something new. You can try everything Brilliant has to offer for the low cost of free for a full 30 days. Visit brilliant.org/Dr. Swellman or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off of Brilliant's annual premium subscription plan. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. The strategies I'm about to go over both work similarly in Red and Blue, but Pokemon Blue is used as one particular strategy was found on that version, which is not currently routed in Red version. For Pokemon Yellow version, the reverse badge acquisition category has some major differences that would require its own video. Our first exploits start right off the bat, and these utilize something called RNG manipulation. RNG Manip uses specific timings and movements to influence different parts of the game's memory. This ends up producing known outcomes for things that are usually random. In this case, the run requires a trainer ID of 45831 and a Charmander with very specific stats. The trainer ID is a trainer's unique identifier number, and in order to make use of one of the major glitches later on, it has to be the number I just mentioned. This is generated when starting a new game, and through a specific setup of buffered inputs in the main screens, runners can get frame-perfect inputs to get the ID they need. Aspects of the game's memory that runners manip advance on every CPU cycle the game makes, making it very difficult to get the same outcomes over and over. Thankfully, the Generation 1 Pokemon games have an input buffer system, so if you hold down a button in anticipation of an action, the game will take that input on the first possible frame. For the route he's using in this run, Stocchi needs a Charmander that has specific stats, with the DVs in particular being 1, 0, 2, and 4. This RTA method was originally found by another runner named Interpenter in 2017, and it's based off the Charmander used in Mr. Wint's Pokemon Red task back in August of 2014. While this was made viable in real time, it's considered by the community to be one of the hardest manipulations to perform in Red and Blue. First off, it requires runners to set up a player name with a length of 5 characters exactly. Stocchi uses UUAAA specifically for reasons I'll explain later, and while I'm talking about character names, the rival name is RRRGPG-. We'll talk about that one later as well. Anyways, the main goal here is to get to Oak Slab and save in front of the Charmander ball on a specific frame of the in-game timer. After that, runners reset and perform specific actions to get the Charmander with the 1024 DVs. Pokemon DVs are generated after providing or not providing a nickname to the Pokemon you obtain, so they can be manipulated up until that point. Typically, runners will verify this during the rival battle and check their stats after leveling up. If their stats are 21, 11, 10, 13, and 11, then the Charmander is ready to go. Now at this point after winning the rival battle, things calm down for a little while. The game progresses like normal for the next 5.5 minutes, where runners pick up Oak's parcel from Viridian City and deliver it to him, then head up through Viridian Forest to Pewter City. After stopping at the Pokemart to get a very specific set of items, we arrive at the point where normally you'd need to battle Brock at his gym and get the Boulder Badge before progressing. In order to bypass this gym, we need to perform a glitch called Brock Through Walls. Given the name of the glitch, it does exactly what you'd expect it to and lets the player walk through walls. While the glitch is pretty clear-cut in its use, how it works is a bit more complicated. This trick is an extension of another glitch called Brock Skip. If you move past the youngster blocking the path to Route 3, he'll stop you and walk you to the Pewter City Gym. However, if you hold start after his last dialog box disappears, it'll buffer an input on the first possible frame and open your menu, all before he takes you to the gym. After saving, quitting, and reloading, you can just walk on to Route 3 as if you were never stopped in the first place. Here's where things get really weird. If you continue to Route 3, go back up towards the mountain, then move to the youngster from the right and talk to him, one of a couple things can happen. In many cases, the game will just lock up and you won't be able to do anything. This is because the game doesn't have a path to follow when the player is to the right of the youngster, and will endlessly search for values in memory that don't exist. Thankfully, this problem is solved by the Charmander manipulation done earlier. The game needs to find coordinates in a 4-byte block based on a starting memory address ending in 2, 6, A, or E. In this case, the Charmander's attack and defense DVs in slot 1 are stored at D186. This means that the values stored here, and the speed and special DVs at D187 are used as an alignment to the next 2 bytes that affect the controller inputs the player will perform during the youngster cutscene. This is manipulated by the amount of power points remaining in both move slot 1 and 2 of the first Pokemon. Runners manage this during both the rival and bug catcher battles leading up to Pewter City, by ensuring that Growl has 38 PP remaining and Scratch has 28 PP remaining, with the moves in that specific order. If done correctly, when the affected memory address points to the controller inputs, it overrides other memory areas, including one that's responsible for defining inputs that can override the ones used in a cutscene. These overriding inputs cause the cutscene to pause when they're in use, but allow control over the player's movement while in that state. As for the walking through walls part, well, that's just the property of being in the cutscene. For Stocchi's run, he has to hold B to override the cutscene after talking to the youngster, then just does his movements to get out of bounds. The goal of all of this is to reach Cerulean Cave much earlier than intended, and while in the cave, catch a Ditto by using some more RNG manipulation. This concept isn't far removed from how the Charmander was manipulated, but this is a lot more simple. By saving, quitting, then coming back while using input buffers to get frame-perfect inputs, it's possible to not only manipulate a level 55 Ditto, but also possible to throw a regular Pokeball at it and catch it first try, as long as it's done on the right frame. This is another reason why the player name is specifically 5 characters, as the text prints on screen when using a Pokeball, and will delay the catch rolling that happens, causing the catch to likely fail. It kinda reminds me of that myth we all knew about when we were kids, where if you held down and B while trying to catch a Pokemon, it would make the catch easier. Unfortunately, that trick didn't work for us, but with Stocchi holding A while catching the Ditto instantly, it almost feels like it should've. Getting back on track before I get too nostalgic, While the Ditto is fairly high level, it's not going to be used against the gym leaders. In fact, after switching Ditto to the first position, it's going to be used for a more important glitch coming up. Remember when I said that Stocchi went to buy some items at the Pokemart back in Pewter City? Well, he specifically bought 7 Pokeballs, 1 Potion, 1 Burn Heal, 1 Escape Rope, 1 Awakening, and 1 Paralyze Heal. 1 Pokeball is used for catching Ditto, and 1 Escape Rope is used to warp all the way back to Pallet Town, setting his items up for what I consider to be the most game-breaking point of this run. Going back to Route 1 and encountering a Pokemon with 2 moves is the key to the next glitch. If you use Ditto to transform, switch the copy moves in the moveset, and run away from the battle, the first move will be replaced with a dash. When you get into your next battle and use it, very unpredictable things can happen. This is a variation of a set of glitched Pokemon moves in the game known as Super Glitch moves, with this one in particular being known as the Cooltrainer Glitch. This happens due to something called buffer overflow. This is when the game copies more data than what's intended to a location, and the additional data spills into different parts of memory. In this case, when the game tries to find the name of the move, it looks for it beyond the actual move name list and grabs a random 20 bytes of memory as the name. This name is stored in CD60 and is later copied to CF4B in memory, and that's where things can get really broken. It's assumed that when this copy operation happens, the game has an end of string symbol to stop the copying. Think of it as like when you put a period at the end of a sentence to show the statement is done. When this isn't present, the game just keeps corrupting memory until it overwrites the entirety of the RAM and crashes the game. With this being an absolute mess of a glitch, let's talk about how runners make use of it. The Cooltrainer move's effects depend on what was recently displayed on the game's screen. In fact, the data right before the text buffer is something called the screen buffer, which stores saved screen tiles. Before getting into a battle and using the glitch, you can open a full screen menu such as a party, Pokedex, or item menu, which backs up the screen when it's covered by a menu. This is where runners can manipulate the Cooltrainer glitch. The hexadecimal identifier of certain subtiles on the screen influence things that'll happen when the glitch is used. For example, whatever tile is on coordinate Y6 and X1 on the BGB grid will determine what the opposing Pokemon will turn into after Cooltrainer is used. If the hexadecimal value of the subtile in that slot is 4A, then after using the Cooltrainer move, the opposing Pokemon will turn into an Articuno. There's other subtiles that influence DVs and levels, but more importantly, there's subtiles that act as an end of string symbol. The game's hexadecimal value for this is 50, and with a range of subtiles matching this value, it's possible to get in the right spot and end the corruption before it crashes the game. Stocchi does this by flashing the Pokedex full screen menu on this specific point in Route 1. This is because this specific subtile on these bushes are the ones needed to end the corruption. Now there's one more thing I need to cover on this, and it's that the Cooltrainer glitch can be done more than once in battle. So say if you set up the corruption the first time and glitch the screen, you could do it again and generate different results. This is why the player name UUAAA is so important in Stocchi's run, since it prints on the screen when Cooltrainer is activated. With that all out of the way, after getting into battle and doing a specific set of inputs and menu flashes, Stocchi catches a missing no and does it again after performing similar actions. Now for those of you who know about this glitched Pokemon, this leads us into one of our final glitches of the run. When encountering or catching a missing no, the game will add 128 to the quantity in the 6th item slot. If you drop one of that item and do it again to get a stack of 255 in a slot, another glitch can be performed called dry underflow. Documented by runner Lucky Typhlosion, this is a major subglitch that results in part by having a 255 item stack. It takes advantage of a mechanic where if you swap 2 item stacks of the same kind, they'll merge into one stack, then a few steps can be done to underflow the bag's item count as a whole to 255. When you drop items that are above a stack of 255 items, a copy of the stack at 255 will appear where the dropped item was, duplicating the stack. But here's the weird thing. While the items you can visibly see won't decrease, the game's internal count of the items in your pack does. This also means that the cancel button is moved up, and the item above it acts like a cancel button. This causes the item count to be desynchronized with the real cancel button. Now this can break the game in a few ways. When the item count is 1, for example, the second item acts like the cancel button. When using select to reorder items, it only checks whether the item under the cursor is actually the cancel button. If it isn't, the items can be switched. The game also has something similar to the item count called the max menu item count. which helps handle menu boundaries and scrolling. This value is usually 2, and moving past the third item causes the menu to scroll instead. So if the item count is 1, then the max menu item should be 1 as well to ensure the player doesn't scroll past the real cancel button. When using the item swap to combine 2 item stacks, the game will decrease the item count. If you do this enough when the 255 item stacks are the only ones in your inventory, you can reduce the item count to 0. Now, the game doesn't check for this when you're decreasing the item count to 0 through combining stacks, so the max menu item isn't updated, letting you still swap the 2 item stacks freely. This also means that when the item count is 0, both of these items act as the cancel button. After swapping and combining them again, the item count underflows to 255, and with it, the max menu item count. In Stocchi's run, after both missing no battles, he has to do some menu management, a flash of the full screen menu to store it in the screen buffer for another Cooltrainer glitch, and ultimately tosses all of his items but the paralyzed heals that were set to 255. This causes the expanded item pack glitch, allowing runners to move past the cancel button at the bottom of the item menu, and thus expanding the item limit to 255. From here, everything past item 21's memory address goes into different parts of the game's memory. For example, item 34's quantity is the player's X coordinate on the current map. With that in mind, items in the expanded area are based on certain values that are already present in the game's memory. If you move these items or adjust their quantities, you'll actually be changing what's there in memory. And now remember that trainer ID manipulation that was done at the beginning of the run? This actually pays off at this point. The lower byte of the trainer ID is actually item 31 here, and thanks to the manip, that item is a master ball, which ends up being switched with item 2 in Stocchi's run. With that all being said, there's one more thing that needs to be addressed before we start getting the badges. Remember that level 127 Charizard that we were going to use? This is exactly why we need the master ball here. Pokemon usually have a catch rate assigned to them, the lowest being 0 and the highest being 255, with the higher catch rate meaning a Pokemon is easier to catch. However, some evolved Pokemon are never meant to be caught, and thus the catch rate defaults to the lowest possible rate. So instead of suffering through throwing Pokeballs at the Charizard, using a Master Ball is a much easier solution. Stocchi not only does this, but also changes the text speed memory value in the same menu, giving him instant text for the rest of the run. So after all that, the payoff is an instant catch of a glitched level 127 Charizard in the next battle. And by the way, if you've been watching for this long, you are legally obligated to hit the subscribe button. And if you don't, I'm going to item underflow your brain and do it for you. Okay, I don't know who that crazy guy was, but while we're on the topic of item underflow anyway, after catching the Charizard, Stocchi has to drop items until his item quantity is -8 before doing anything else. This is because the gym leaders give you TMs when defeating them, which removes the underflow state and causes a ton of problems if that happens. Now with all that hard stuff out of the way, all Stocchi has to do is move and drop some items in the expanded items area, and by doing that in places that affect the player's coordinates, map location, and other things, he's able to bring Giovanni to him, making this the first gym battle in the run. From here, the last piece of tech that's used is related to Charizard's level 127 status. Once Charizard gains experience, it levels back down to level 100, changing its stats and decreasing its HP to the point where it goes into red bar, or the state where it has low HP and the game continuously beeps at you. This is actually good, as the state makes battles go by much faster due to it skipping Pokemon cries when they're sent out. Now all that's left is for Charizard to sweep through Giovanni's team and end the battle. Much of the game after this comes down to menuing, bringing the gym leaders to you, and then defeating them. But there are some funny moments that come out of these. Like right after beating Giovanni, the run moves some items around to turn the fearsome Team Rocket boss into a PC where you deposit all your Pokemon. One by one, Stocchi gets the badges through the method we've already covered, and after defeating Brock to get his last gym badge, he does some final menuing to change the location when leaving the Pewter City Gym to the entrance of the Hall of Fame room in the Pokemon League. Time stops just before the credits are shown, resulting in Stocchi getting a time of 25 minutes and 26 seconds on August 5th of 2020. While this still stands at the top of the leaderboard to this day, there's actually 2 faster routes that have been found since then. While we're on the topic of that, when you get some time, check out the resources I provided in the description and try out the glitches I covered for yourself. Stay hydrated folks, and thank you so much for watching.